All right, welcome to TLDR Jasmine by your host, as always, Dylan C. Israel. I present you with this not very good created PowerPoint to get us started, just to teach you why we need to do tests, and that's what Jasmine is. Jasmine is a testing framework specifically for JavaScript. So why is it important that we use Jasmine? What is the benefits? Well, TDD, or test-driven development, is a common practice in the software world and seems to be growing in popularity. At the very least, even if you're not doing test-driven development, you're writing tests for your applications. So in that aspect of it being part of a good skill to have, and it's one of my recommended skills if you're trying to become a front-end developer. I think it's something to set you not only will it make you a better developer, but it's a great skill for you to have on your resume because it is what you will be doing in the workplace. It supports agile environments. Pretty much every workplace you're going to go to nowadays, minus a few Goliaths and companies that haven't moved over, is going to be an agile environment. And when you're in this fast-paced environment, you need to have something to make sure that you can write code fast. That's what this is all about, because it allows us to do quicker development. It allows us to debug faster, find our mistakes faster, and it is an excellent form of documentation, so it supports all that quick turnaround. Now, what are we going to be talking about in here? Well, we're going to cover quite a few things. We're going to cover a little bit of setup, not too much, because I've created a branch here. If you go to github.com/pizzapokerguy/jasmine-quickstart, that is the branch that I've created so that you right now, say you didn't even want to watch the video. Why you wouldn't want to watch the video? I don't know. You make bad choices. But say you're making good choices because you're watching this tutorial. I'm just giving you a hard time, guys. All right, so you could pull this down and you could get to writing tests this exact moment, and that's what this branch is there for you, so that you can play around. It's your playground. It's kind of hard to set up Jasmine, and typically you'll set up one time and forget about it. And so here's something that's set up. You can get up and go and start playing around with it this exact moment. Now, what are we going to be covering? We're going to be covering describe, we're going to be covering it, exit, it, before each, and a few other things in the application. All the items that Jasmine in itself is a very great tool, and it's simple, which makes it easily used, which is an excellent thing. So there's really not too many things that we didn't cover. There's one or two more advanced topics, but after that, there's nothing left. So Jasmine is a great testing tool, and it's one of the more common ones, especially if you dive into Angular. It's built into the Angular CLI as its as its testing suite. So it's a great thing to have. Let's go ahead and just dive into it right now. Today's sponsor is me. If you guys want to help me out and get yourself some cool coder gear, coder merch, as they say, you can get the Bro Do You Even Code. We got sweatshirts, we got t-shirts, we got phone cases, we got mugs, stickers. Do you want to flex on your friends who say they code? They're like, #grind, #sweat code, all that sort of bullshit? Nah, man. You just want to be about that life. Tell them, bro, do you even code? You can check out the coding merch in the description below. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. So as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about Jasmine and getting a walkthrough of how to get started with it, and what it offers you when you're writing your JavaScript. And one site I wanted to mention was jasmine.github.io. This is where you can go to see additional examples, go through the docs, the getting started, and all that sort of stuff that you're going to need to know. And we're going to cover the majority of it in this video. You're going to need to have Node installed, because I'm going to install Jasmine globally, which is an NPM package. And then if you're curious what text editor I'm using, because people always ask, it's going to be Visual Studio Code. You can go to code.visualstudio.com to get started. Let's go ahead and dive into it. All right, so to get started with Jasmine and unit testing, there's usually a decent amount of setup. And if you're using something like Gulp or Webpack or anything like that, it's usually going to run in the background. You won't have to set any of this up. But say you just want to play around and you want a playground. I've made this relatively easy. It's easy because it's set up and runs. All you gotta do is pull down the branch. It's called Jasmine Quick Start. It's on my GitHub page. I made it myself. I spent like 30 minutes just trying to get this crap set up. And so you can there'll be a link to the GitHub branch down below if you want to clone it. If you want to star the repo, follow me. pretty dope. But what I'm going to do real quick is just run through quickly what all these files are. So you're going to see a lot of these files, and really all you have to, a fave icon, we all know what that is. These 3 or 4 files here, these are the files that are going to run Jasmine in the browser so that we can see visually the output. Now, you really don't need to worry about that once you have Webpack set up. It's going to compile all this and do all this for you. But in this case, just know these are our Jasmine dependencies here in this Jasmine folder. Now we have this spec file, and then we have jasmine.json, and this is essentially going to run files in our Jasmine stuff. And although we're not using this, I just wanted to make an example here so that you knew how to use it if you'll notice down the road. So we'll be doing our test directly in index.html, but if you were using Webpack or Karma or something to help compile this, you would denote your test files by the file name .spec.js. That spec essentially is Jasmine's way of saying this is a testing file. Jasmine, please run tests against this. So that's what that spec is there, and it'd be the same in like TypeScript if you're using, just except .ts. And you can see here we're saying the spec files. These are our, this is our dependency where our directories where we want to run the tests. If we were using a normal environment. Then we have the README, and now we have our index.html. Now these are all those dependencies to make sure Jasmine runs here. We have just an HTML tag, a head tag. We don't have anything in the body. What you're going to see here is just a script, and so we're going to write our JavaScript here. Now the way that testing works is you write your application, right? The JavaScript part of it, the logic part of it, and then in Jasmine, in our test, we then test against that. So we have a very basic test here. And so the first thing we need to understand are the describe blocks, which you'll see take in a description, or take in a string and then a callback function. So essentially what's going on here is we've used describes when we want to group things together. Let's say we were testing a component. We could test that component, or say we were testing a specific function that was going to have a bunch of tests. We could maybe name the function here and its purpose. So you're going to write your test group descriptions here. So I put here, give you an idea. Now this is actually a test. We are now instantiating that this is a test. And here, what you're going to be right in there most of the time is your text expectation. And we'll have a better example here as we go and I add some code here so you can get an idea. Now, when you are writing your test in a production environment, it usually goes when it can in one or two directions, but this is how it normally flows. So we have what's called, there's a range, act, insert, and assert. And what that essentially means is you're going to go into this order, and I actually encourage you to go ahead and comment this so that you can see the flow and get custom with it. And even at work, I do this as well, not because I'm going to forget this because I write unit tests daily, but because this is what is expected really at my current workplace. So, and something that although at the first glance I didn't like, I've grown to like quite a bit because it makes it very easy to see the flow of your code in here. So the arrange is, hey, in order for this test to work, we want to set up some data to test against, right? So in our get opposite method here, what we're returning in here is the opposite value, right? So here we're setting up a Boolean that we are then going to pass into get opposite. Now this act is, hey, we need to call some methods, we need to call some functions, we need to take some action here that we are then going to assert against. Assert saying, hey, now we write our expectation. This expect is really now we're getting into our third aspect of Jasmine, our third aspect of our test here. This expect is, say, we are expecting, and in here we now can write what we are expecting from here. This is just evaluating. Now, if we were to say we could put result is equal to result, we would expect that to be true, right? And so this to be is just one aspect of Jasmine, which is saying, we are saying that, we expect this to be true, and it is, right? False then becomes true. And we would expect 1 to be 1. That would be a true statement. 2 to be 1 would be a false statement, and we'd be able to see that in our test. So Before we do that, let's go ahead and showcase what our tests are going to look like in the browser, and so that we can see it as we're going. Now, I am using what is called an extension, oh my goodness, Live Server here. I encourage you to get it if you have, especially if you have dual monitors. And so what that's going to allow me to do is I click, normally this would say live right here, kind of hard to see with the screen here. See how it says port 5500? It'll say live, and what that's going to do is allow me to have this localhost application run, and when I save a change in that file in the place where I clicked live, it's going to then update. So let's take a look at what we have here before we move on and give an example of some tests. So what you're seeing here is really Jasmine at the end of the day. So one spec is one test. We have 0 failures, as you can see. I don't even worry about that. But you'll see right here that, hey, these are the tests that are passing. That's great, right? And the reason that we have this here and the reason we have these descriptions is to know what the tests do, but also say we change our code and a test breaks. It then gives us an idea where we need to go fix our code. And then we don't have to search through tens of thousands of lines of code. You may not be thinking it's that big of a deal when you're getting started on your homework and you're writing, 300, 400, 500 500 line applications, but when you're working with tens of thousands of lines of code, you're not the only one working on it. You're not the only one maintaining it. And that's why these tests are so crucial. So this gives you an idea of what's going on, what's passing. So let's go ahead and give an example of a failing test right now, so we can just see the difference before we dive a little bit deeper. All right, so you'll see we have our tests live side by side. Let's give an example of how our code might break, right? So you can see here the get opposite is supposed to return the opposite value, but let's say this accidentally gets deleted. What we now get is, oh my God, our code has failed, and we know exactly where to look. It says, where's our code failed? Well, write test group description here, write your test expectation here. And it tells us, hey, we expected false to be true. That doesn't make any sense. And then we go back. What is getting called here? Well, get opposite's getting called. What is going on? And you're looking at this. Well, this isn't exactly getting the opposite of Jack, right? And so you can then say, oh, let me go back and fix this. When bam, our tests are passing again. And it's very easy to see how our code, how our tests here are supposed to prevent us from errors down the road. Now let's go over a little bit deeper some more method names and setup for Jasmine. Alright, so I've written 2 new functions, add and minus, and we're going to go ahead and create a new describe block here together. Just walk us through the process, right? So what we want to do is we're going to treat these as a group. These are going to be our math functions. And so in our describe, we're going to say math functions, because that's describing, that's the group, what we're going to be doing in here. Then we have our callback function. Alright, now that we have that, what we want to do is our first it test. Now, we're going to add some additional things in just a moment, but just want to give an example. And we'll say something like adds to sums 2 numbers. Gets the sum of 2 numbers. And you don't have to write in all caps. It's just something I usually do for the most part. All right, now that we have that, we can, create our our arrange, and we'll say something like const num1 equals 2 and const num2 equals 3. Now we want to go ahead and create an act where we're going to store the result here equal to add, and we'll just pass in num1, num2, and now we can do our range. And here we'll say expect result dot to be 5, and that will work just fine. Now to be is like the go-to of, hey, we're just making sure this value is equal to this value, but there's a lot of other expectations that we can have with Jasmine. They don't have to be just truthy values. Perhaps we wanted to see if there is, does it not have our Jasmine classes with us? Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, so I will look some up real quick. Alright, so perhaps we wanted to see if it's just larger than certain numbers. Now this isn't really the idea of this function, but we could with 2b greater than, and we'll say 3, for instance. Save that. Cool, and you'll see that it's passed. But if we go ahead and make it 5, it's equal to 5. Thus, it would fail, right? We expected 5 to be greater than 5. It doesn't pass. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. Now, you can also concat on here this dot not, and this will allow us to, it will actually invert that, right? Because 5 is equal to 5, it fails. And this will work for pretty much any of your expects. That's one way of going about it. For the time being, we're just going to be true. Dot to be true, which works as well. And of course, we can we can do equations in here as well. And so we would expect this to be 6. So that works, right? Because 5 plus 1 is 6. Let's go ahead and copy this real quick. And we'll do the same thing for minus, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you can focus on just certain tests as you're trying to debug. Because sometimes you're going to have to go and you're going to have to figure out why some things are failing, and it's hard when you're running all these tests. When sometimes you just need to focus on the one. Minuses returns subtracted value. So in our example here, we're going to do minus, and what is result 1? So this should fail, right? Because we expected 0 to be 6. Makes sense. So 2. Let's go ahead and do that like so. So you'll see, -1 to be 6 does, because it's not the case. Now we can fix that just fine. But let's say that we got our in our head when we were writing our test, we got this mixed up, and we thought it was actually going to minus y minus x, and so we're like, well, 3 minus 2 is 1. What's going on here? And we have all these tests running, and multiple ones are failing. How might we just focus on this one test so that we don't have to worry about the other stuff? How we would do that is on this it here, all we would do is put an F. And focus it. Not F it, focus it, right? And now we're only worried about this exact test so that we can just hone in on this test. Now, of course, you want to make sure that you are going to take this off when you're done, and you'll see it runs only one of the 3 tests that we have, and it's only focused on this one, and it's failing right now. And if we were to do it on this test over here, it's good. It passed, right? And you'll see here as it's grayed out, that means we didn't run our test that we have. And you'll notice how it's indented, so this is 2 tests under here. And you can nest describes within describes, and it's a pretty common thing depending on how complex your application is, right? So that's one way that you can focus on tests. And let's say that you just wanted to ignore it, you could exit as well, and that would get you to ignore and say, look, we're not worried about those tests right now. We want to ignore it. We're trying to work on this other stuff. So that's one way that you can do it as well. You'll notice that it's now, I guess that's gold as well. So let's say that we wanted to do some initial calculations, because any application you have hundreds or thousands of tests, and you don't want to have to repeat yourself as you're writing these tests. Like right here, we repeated num1 and num2. It'd be nice if we just had access to num1 and num2 and we didn't have to repeat ourselves. We can do that with a before each here. And before each. And in here, we just pass a callback function. There we go. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to, outside of it, display we're going to create a let num1, and we can just leave it undefined, and we'll say let num2, and we can go ahead and set that undefined. Now, in our before each, we are now going to define it, and we'll say num1 is equal to 2, and num2 is equal to 3. And now we can eliminate this arrange, although you'll typically have an arrange, so just keep that in mind. But let's just comment it out for the time being. Let's comment this out for the time being and save it. And now that we'll have injected, oh, we forgot to fix this test here. So expected result, there we go. Well, that's good, it worked, right? So and our test told us, hey, you didn't fix our broken test. So num1 is still, what happened here? What is going on? Num1, num2. Am I getting a little hyphy? So num1 is 2, expected -1. Oh, I did it in the wrong section. Oh, I broke everything. Everything broke. There we go. Okay, excuse me. We got a little hyphy. But you'll see here that we were able to eliminate this, and then 2 plus 3 is 5, and then 2 minus 1 is, or 2 minus 3 is -1. But that's one way if we can eliminate items. There's also before all, and that will create all the specs. It will add it for all of the tests that you have in that file state. I don't recommend using before all. Really at the end of the day, before each is fine. And there's also an after all and after each. I haven't found a case to use it, but say you need something to clean up after your test run, because maybe you have some asynchronous function that you want to make sure, maybe it's an observable that you're subscribed to, you want to make sure it unsubscribes after your test. You can do that as well, so keep that in mind. Alright guys, that's pretty much it at the end of the day. Now, it gets a lot more complicated once you start introducing frameworks, and when you need to maybe spy on asynchronous calls. That's something we didn't cover. It's a little bit advanced, and it's kind of hard to set up something that's in a quick start guide for that. I wanted to get you started with the bare bones minimum here. The only other thing I would say is that although you can use 2B for pretty much everything, because at the end of the day a test is evaluating a true or false, there are a bunch of different methods you can call on to expect, but you can also just go ahead and in your expect just set it up there and call 2B true. So keep that in mind. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell so you know when I'm releasing new stuff. Check out my courses. There's links in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, so Jared asks, if you were to do it all over again, would you still create a YouTube channel, or would you go to the blog or podcast route? What are the pros and cons to each, in your opinion? Thanks for the vids. They've helped me grow as a developer. Well, you're welcome. And I personally love the video platform. It allows me to be very dynamic with my content. I've done things like Codecademy tutorials. I've done project tutorials. I've now done, I've done tutorials, and I've of course done opinionated videos. And it gives me a platform where whatever I want to do, I can do. Now, you could do the same thing with a blog or a podcast, but I think video makes it it has a little bit more leeway in that aspect. Now, I think you could be successful with a blog. I think you can be successful with podcasts. I know people who have had not only successful blogs, podcasts, but also channels, and I think those are great routes to go. What I would say is, instead of worrying about the pros and the cons, worry about which one's going to be the most fun to you, because you're not going to explode overnight. Most people don't, and you need to find that consistent option when you're trying to start a long-term side project like this that you will actually continue to work on. I know a ton of devs who have written one blog, did 2 podcasts, and put up 4 videos on a YouTube channel. And it could be that they just started something, weren't aware of what it takes. So just find the one that works best for you, and it's okay to play around, but choose one, stick with it, and dive into it, and just be consistent with it. That's really all you need to be successful at it. And as you mature, your content matures, and I mean mature as a developer, and as you mature as a video creator, your videos may get better. And it's okay to put out crap stuff when you get started, because you're learning and you're growing, and just understand that's part of the process. I want to thank our sponsor, TemplateMonster.com. Not only can you buy templates, PowerPoints, resumes, anything that you can think of, portfolio sites, you can also sell yours on their platform and earn a nice side income. There's a link in the description below to check them out at TemplateMonster.com.